Hi, my name is Neves. I'm the founder of Knowman, a consulting company focused on knowledge management and organizational learning. I'm also the master storyteller behind Social Now, a very unique conference on the use of enterprise social tools to improve internal communications, collaboration, and knowledge sharing and retention. I hope you enjoyed this interview, which is part of a series looking at the impact of digital technology in the current and future workplace.
Morning.
I'm wondering, where are you calling us today?
So I'm in the UK, just outside a town called Winchester.
Nice. And who are you? What do you do?
So I work for a company called QUBE. I'm the managing director for the company. Our goal is to promote virtual office space to bring organizations together that are distributed around the globe.
And Cube is a very different type of tool. And I also have the feeling that you don't even like to call it a tool. So how do you describe it?
Yeah, it's a common problem that people just think of QUBE as software, and it's much more than that. It's actually a way of working that I think is quite unique. It's underpinned by software because it provides basically a virtual office space. But the real secret of QUBE is it provides a whole suite of tools for people to effectively manage their organizations or their businesses. Those tools have been developed over 25 years of research into how organizations can be successful in managing change, managing their staff, learning and development, all of the key things that really underpin the operation of an organization. There are an award-winning set of tools that have been developed by Professor Eddie Obeng, who's the Director of Learning of the organization. And then the final piece of the puzzle as far as QUBE is concerned is that organizations have access to experts in how to operate in the environment and how to use the tools to maximize their success. So you need to think of it as three things: a virtual environment, great set of tools and techniques, and then people that can help you understand those tools, apply them in the workplace, and effectively then become self-sufficient.
Nice. So virtual environment tools and people to guide you and help you there.
Exactly.
Um, what? How did Cube come about? Why was it created? What gaps were identified that Cube came to provide an answer to?
So Pentacle, the organization, started around about 30 years ago. And it's a consulting company and a learning and development company. And we've built a track record of helping large-scale organizations to transform either digitally or implementing different business strategies. But the problem that we started to face was it was getting very expensive and time consuming for organizations to either come to us for us to teach them or for us to go to them. And when you actually dig into it, the problem is that big organizations are geographically distributed. So we started to think about, well, is there a way that we can create a virtual environment that would allow organizations to do that, but without the friction involved of physical travel? So we started to then develop this idea of QUBE because when we looked at what the available offerings were for virtual learning and collaboration, that they're not very good. They don't create that fully immersive, interactive environment. So that's why we started to develop QUBE, so that now we're able to provide the original offering of the Pentacle organization, but through this virtual environment, which is a fraction of the cost and improves the time to market for organizations.
Do you see it more as as like a platform and an environment for learning, or do you also see it as a collaboration? So if you were to choose like one or the other, and I know obviously they're not opposites or anything like that or mutually exclusive, but is it more of a learning instrument and environment, or is it more towards the collaboration? How has it evolved?
I think the two are intrinsically linked. You have to start off with a learning environment, but then you move into an execution environment. And this is the common problem with a lot of the software tools that are out there today is organizations will buy the software, they'll deploy the software, but then there's no support for how to use it and how to get the best out of it. People start to get confused and uncomfortable. And so as a consequence, they tend to then put that software, effectively on the shelf. And I like to use the term shelfware. So our view is, in order to get the best out of QUBE, you have to go through that learning journey, not just for the software, but for the tools and techniques that underpin it. But our goal is high touch teaching and applied learning at the start. But then as organizations start to get familiar with the tool, that starts to tail off, and they're effectively then self-sufficient in their execution. And ultimately where we want to get to is this provides a viable alternative to people being in physical office space, and they can be just as productive, in fact more productive, in this virtual environment, executing their business operations.
At Social Now, we will hear how NHS has been using QUBE. What kind of experiences will we hear about? What kind of processes or practices or projects have they been implementing using QUBE?
The NHS, I think, is a brilliant use case because the particular area that we were helping is NHS in Scotland. Scotland is a sparsely populated country, a large geographic footprint. And so a lot of the people in that organization could never physically get together. It was prohibitively expensive, time consuming for people to travel to locations. So as a consequence, they weren't able to properly collaborate working together. So they saw QUBE as a great solution to that. The consequence was that they were able to execute initiatives, changes to clinical protocols at a fraction of the time that they would have been able to do in the past. And even to the point where once they'd completed their initiatives, they were then able to continue to refine those, post the project completing, because they still had this environment where they could get together. In terms of the journey that they went through, it's not unsurprising. The first time we got everybody together, they were very uncomfortable. It's a very different way of operating. The virtual environment is not natural to a lot of people. And so they had to go through that process of sort of relearning how to work, if you like. And that takes a little bit of time. We actually say 3 strikes and you're in. You go on QUBE 3 times, and then it starts to become natural and you become much more comfortable. But in a lot of cases, the first time you go into this environment, people are paralyzed by fear of the unknown. So you have to go through that piece of the journey. But once you're through it, then the pace really starts to pick up, because the underlying concepts that underpin QUBE, they're quite simple, and they're effectively repeatable regardless of what you're doing. So we have the concept of writing first and talking second. So we get everybody to contribute. Contrast that to the standard video conference or audio conference, where most people place the call on mute, somebody's talking, and they do their email. It's impossible to do that on QUBE. So we teach people those basic concepts. Then we start to introduce the tools and techniques for executing business change. That gives you the sort of full package of things that you need. And then we let them loose and we ask them to run their projects, and we then just provide them with support and guidance as they go. So that was the journey that the the NHS team went on. And I think what you'll hear from them in their conclusion is a sort of summary of what I've just went through, the great things, the bad things, and hopefully you'll get a very balanced view of that journey.
Great. The NHS is very dear to me because I lived in the UK for a few years, and I worked at the NHS Modernisation Institute, and I remember the endless phone calls, and it is exactly as you're describing. But I also relate to what you said about people feeling sometimes very isolated. Certainly in the areas I was working with, innovation, you did have people like pockets of people really wanting to change the system and really wanting to innovate, but they felt quite isolated. And in terms of QUBE, you mentioned the time span or the reduction of the time required to implement some of the changes and the benefits they wanted. But was there also, did they perceive the inclusion or the bringing people together and them not feeling isolated as a benefit as well, or that wasn't that apparent?
No, absolutely. And I think that it's somewhat of a hidden benefit of QUBE that there's a couple of things that I would point to. It's a virtual environment. We use avatars, so everybody is effectively the same. It doesn't matter what your social background is, whether English is your first language, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert. In this world, everybody's the same. And that encourages everybody to put forward their point of view. And the tool set is absolutely geared towards that. There is no hiding place. Everybody has to contribute through that right first, talk second protocol. So a lot of the unconscious bias that exists in the workplace today just disappears in QUBE. And that was certainly the experience of the NHS team. So I think that's a huge benefit in its own right. The second thing is that it connects experts. If you think about the NHS, the clinical experts are a scarce resource. As a consequence, they're extremely busy. So getting their time is extraordinarily difficult. And so if you're asking a set of clinical experts from around the UK to give up a day of travel, a day for a meeting or a workshop, and then another day of travel, they can't do it. Whereas on QUBE, there's no need to do that. We can break workshops into, 3 2-hour slots. There's no travel time. It can be scheduled at, convenient times of the day for everybody. So suddenly that friction of getting access to experts that can help, frame and execute a project disappears.
But where is the human side of things? And let me provoke you a bit. One thing, I've been lucky enough to experience QUBE already. And I was really, I love the idea, the concept, and I can totally relate with those benefits you described. And one thing I found strange to me is because there is that human concern and valuing of people's knowledge and how they feel. And yet it is called a QUBE, and people are very square. They're cubes. Where is the roundness? Where is the human side? And how can you bring that up? Because I'm sure that's one of the things people will ask you as well.
It's an interesting point, and I think it's a fixation on the only way to interact with people is to have a physical face-to-face relationship, And I'll give you an example where I don't think that that's necessary. So we run our company, we eat our own dinner, if you like, and we run everything on QUBE. And we meet every day. We have a stand-up coffee meeting at 10:30 UK time every day. It lasts for between 15 minutes and half an hour. And we started that, probably a year ago. And it's just the same as having a staff meeting. Everybody has a drink. We have what we call a simultaneous slurp at the start of the meeting. We laugh and joke. We find out what people have been doing at the weekend. We have a board where everybody puts up what they did yesterday, what they're going to do today, and we talk through that. And for me, that's identical to staff meetings that I used to have in the physical world, but coupled with the advantages of QUBE.
Yep.
I didn't have to physically get to a meeting room or go onto an audio call, which removes a lot of the advantages of physically getting together. I absolutely have a great relationship with my colleagues in QUBE, most of whom I've never met. And so for me, it's and I've had a 30-year career in the old world, if you like, and this is just as good, if not better.
It's really interesting, and one thing that I already knew about those coffees. I was going to ask you about them, and it's because for me the loveliest thing about that practice that you've created at Pentacle is that you effectively are using the technology, but you're actually creating the social processes, and it's all about, again, how you use it and not the technology itself. And I think it's brilliant. And in terms of social, I've got a question for you from Thierry de Bayon. He's been at Social now in the past and is coming back this year. And he asked us, how do you define social? He asked us to ask you. How do you define social? And is QUBE a social tool?
So the way I look at the concept of social, it's about interaction, and it's about bringing people together. If I thought about the concept of a social gathering, it would be getting people together to do something, and that can be in the personal or leisure context, or it can be in the business context. Clearly, QUBE operates in the business context. And our reason for being is to bring people together to collaborate and execute on business ideas. So that's my definition of social in the business context. And how does QUBE support that? It's a way of bringing experts together. Again, at a fraction of the cost as you would have in the physical world, without all of the overhead of travel, to collaborate and deliver on great ideas. So that's how I see social, and how QUBE supports that. And I think there's a really important factor about all of the things that we're doing. Is contribution to climate change.
I was thinking about that as well.
Just think about air travel. So 30% of all air travel is business related. That is people flying around the world to see customers, work with colleagues on projects, and change. If we could achieve just a 20% reduction in that, through providing great virtual capabilities for people to, collaborate with customers or colleagues on business change, that would have a 1% reduction in the carbon footprint. It costs us nothing to do. all the capabilities are there. It's just about a mindset change.
Totally.
And so I think there's a huge, underpinning component to this, which is that climate change piece.
Simon, some quick fire questions for you. What is QUBE's main competitor?
I don't think there is one. I think it's unique.
Okay. The proudest moment in the life of QUBE?
I think it's when people get it. It's we go through that familiarization and that learning process, and then people like yourself go, oh, I understand this. This is great. And there's a huge amount of satisfaction when people understand what the true capabilities are.
An important lesson that you've learned from working at QUBE?
People actually love their travel.
Do they really?
They love their travel. And when you come along with a solution that reduces travel, a lot of barriers go up.
And one last quick fire question, fun episode with dealing with a client or something that you've heard from a client working with QUBE.
It's I think it's a generational thing, which is the next generation, or the sort of the generation before the millennials. It's a complete anathema to them. So you're asking them to put a headset on and become a boxy avatar. They completely and utterly freak out. And one of the funniest things that we came across is people saying, originally we had sort of more human type avatars rather than the boxy shape that made everybody the same. And bizarrely, all the men wanted to be dressed as women, so that's really quite odd.
Interesting. That surprised me.
So probably better to be the boxy avatar, right?
Yeah, that's fine. More neutral, at least.
At least you can choose your color.
Yeah, that's good. Simon, let me just. I was going to wrap up, but I just wanting to ask you another question. We touched on a few obstacles or kind of arguments that companies can probably bring up when considering QUBE. How would you summarize them? What are the main concerns that organizations have when looking at something like QUBE, which is a bit out of ordinary?
Yeah, I think there's two things, which is organizations already have a lot of software. So when you turn up with another software product, their immediate reaction is, well, why is this different to the tools that I've already got? Okay. So explaining why this is unique is a challenge. And then obviously the other challenge that all organizations face is the one of security and control. Okay. So, one big challenge that we have is to demonstrate that QUBE is extremely secure, it's well controlled, and therefore they're not putting their business at risk by deploying the software in their organization.
Okay, I need to ask you a follow-up question on that. When you mean secure, the control bit, is it that they fear they may lose control with their people, lose on QUBE, or is it more a sense of control of their data and the stuff that happens inside QUBE?
Straightforward control of data, the potential for software to provide an access point for cyber criminals to get into the organization. Okay. So it's very much the basics of technology security and control.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, Simon, one final question. What's next for QUBE? Where do you see it going?
I think for us, we want to see organizations that can effectively operate in the majority on QUBE. So become truly virtual organizations. And I think this is becoming more and more of a reality when you look at the number of businesses and organizations now that's truly digital, they're offering digital products, or the service-based organization. why not be able to operate fully on QUBE? Radically reduce your physical office footprint, radically reduce your need for travel, be able to get access to experts from all over the globe. So think about a business that is made up of employees from 30 different countries who never actually meet physically but operate as a virtual organization. I think that's very, very exciting. And I think it would be great for the planet, and it's going to be great for developing GDP globally, because it reduces so many different barriers that exist today.
That's great, Simon. Thank you so much for your time, and I really look forward to hearing more from QUBE and how it's being used at the NHS during the upcoming Social Now. Thank you very much.
Terrific.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation. For more interviews and other great content, visit socialnow.org.